It's hardest for us to see our strengths, and we become fixated on our weaknesses and the things that we see as a deficit versus focusing on our unique gifts and how we can cultivate those and bring those into areas that are less comfortable and less familiar.
I'm Amy Jo Martin. Welcome to the Why Not Now show. You know that thing you've been thinking about doing? Yeah, that one. Why not now? Have you ever actually taken the time to ask yourself, what's stopping me? Let's talk it through. This is your chance to give that idea the attention it deserves and take action. Each episode, I have a chat with a fascinating person, from entrepreneurs to athletes, celebrities, my parents, rocket scientists, and all walks of life. We talk through a critical time when they've asked themselves, why not now? We dissect that day or even that moment, step by step. Just let go. Piera Gelardi is on the show today. She is the co-founder and executive creative director of Refinery 29, one of the fastest growing independent fashion and style websites in the United States, with over 550 million users across their platform, more than 500 employees. And Refinery 29 is the leading global media company focused on young women. So Piera has been setting the vision from a creative standpoint from the beginning. They started the company in 2005, and she talks about what that means to her. This woman has so much zest for life, and she just sees the world through such a unique, unmatched lens when it comes to adding her own creative filter on things, everything she does. And it's just fascinating to hear Piera talk through her own personal journey of what it's like to start something where you feel like you have that creative control for the most part at that younger, riper age of the company. And then as it grows and grows, how she's dealt with that adjustment of remaining creative and at the top of her game, but also doing it for a very large organization that she's created. One of the things I really appreciate about Piera is her ability to think creatively, not just to view her work as the visual aspect, because she's an incredible art director, of course, but her ability to apply her creative mind to innovative solutions that don't have anything to do with the visual side. It's really fascinating to learn a little bit more about her brain and how it works and see a little bit under the hood. So enjoy this conversation with Piera. She's the type of person that you just want to get to know and become friends with and sit down and have a conversation. We tackle the most taboo topics on the Why Not Now show. Oftentimes, you're hearing guests share things they've never shared before. In the spirit of things we don't typically talk about, you should know that the Why Not Now show is supported by Poo-Pourri, the original before-you-go toilet spray. It's magic. My friends at Poo-Pourri have literally taken the smell out of you-know-what. This pure blend of essential oils stops bathroom odor before it begins. Visit poopourri.com, and Why Not Now listeners get 20% off with code WHYNOTNOW. That's all one word. And you can hear the story about Poo-Pourri in our interview with founder Susie Batiste. That's Why Not Now, episode 28. Poo-Pourri is also available at Target. Piera, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
I'm great. I'm so excited to be talking to you.
I am really excited to connect with you as well. And in the spirit of Why not now? Let's hop right in. Can you tell me about a time when you had a decision to make and you asked yourself, why not now?
Well, I have so many stories I could tell, but the one that came up first for me was about 7 years ago when I was 7 years into building my company, Refinery 29, and had built it up from the ground up, from startup roots up until we had scaled up a little bit with staff and we were really ramping up our content production. And we got to this point where I had this vision for our brand and what it was that I wanted to represent in the lives of women and really wanting to be a place that celebrated women's individuality, complexity, and strengths. And also, as a creative person, really wanted to stand for a level of quality and visual excellence that just I was compelled to put forth in any work that I did. But we were at this point where all of a sudden people within the company on the marketing side, on the content side, and the business side were telling me that creative was a bottleneck. And they were saying, the creative process is slowing us down. It's not efficient. We need to be able to just roll with it and let everyone make their own creative decisions. And in particular, they really felt like it was important for our editors to have complete autonomy to pull from stock photography sites. And, I just felt at the time I felt really frustrated and misunderstood because why I was sort of against this whole idea was because I really cared about the quality level, but most of all, I cared about representing our audience responsibly. And what was out there in the world of stock photography really didn't represent the image of women that we wanted to put forth. So just like an example of that was, at the time when you looked up, images of plus-size women, practically all of the images of plus-size women showed them measuring their waist or standing on a scale or pinching their belly. So essentially showing these images where this aspect of a woman's identity was like the whole focus of the image. Like these women weren't the protagonists of their life story living these, bold lives. They were very, they were really reduced in the imagery, and the images were just, that classic, like white women laughing into salad bowls. Like they, not only were they not representative of race and different body images and different views on what beauty looks like, they were also just, the quality level was just terrible. And so this was this really frustrating time where there was so much pressure on me to just relinquish this creative control. And I remember going to drinks with a friend, and I was so frustrated. And I was saying, they're saying that the creative process is a bottleneck, but I need to control the brand. I need to keep the brand tight. And I was making this clenching motion with my hands. And she looked at me and she said, "Isn't it interesting that they're saying that creativity is a bottleneck, and the words and hand motion that you're doing is completely reflecting that notion back to them?"
So your Buddha friend having drinks with
I know, it was the most aha moment. I said, I just, it was so revelatory for me. And I said, oh my God, you're completely right. And so I thought, what is the language and the hand motions I'm going to use to help convince people that this is not the case? So I said, you know what, I'm going to say that creativity is the guardrails on the highway. I want everyone to be able to drive as fast as they need on the road, but I'm going to keep them from falling off the road. And what was interesting is I thought that by using that language, I was just going to play a Jedi mind trick on them. But actually what happened is that it completely shifted the way that I thought about the entire problem. And it opened me up to realize the solution. And what I realized was that it wasn't just about relinquishing and saying, like, yes, you can use these stock images and that's fine. It was that basically if these images don't exist, if the images out there don't represent women in the way that we want to represent women, we need to create them. And if they're not there, who's going to create them other than us? So basically what happened is I decided, you know what, we're going to start creating our own stock images. We called it the anti-stock archive. And it started with just photographing, colorful tampons on a seamless background in the office, or shooting our staffers as the models so that we could represent, what women really look like in these images. But what ended up happening is that it basically changed the entire way that I started to see. It just changed the way I kind of downloaded my brain into a toolkit for others to use, and that stock photo archive kind of grew and grew. And what ended up happening was that it became this enormous brand strength of ours, that our editors were able to work really quickly. We would find out what themes they needed. We would photograph the images that they needed in the way that we thought was responsible. And what happened is that now 92% of our audience can recognize our images in a lineup. We even said, you know what, we don't want to just change the way stock images look for our own site. We want to change the way they look in the industry. So we partnered with Getty and did this collection called No Apologies, because we don't think women should have to apologize for who they are or what they look like. And so we've now created tens of thousands of images that represent women in all of their complexity, beauty, and strength. And it's now, something that many people in the company are proud of, that drives our business goals, our efficiency goals, and our brand goals all at once. But it definitely, I think it was this moment for me that just changed the way that I approach problems, but also fundamentally made me ask the question of myself constantly: if we don't challenge the systems that exist, who will? And so that was just this huge transformative moment for me.
Huge. Wow. I mean, if it's like the perfect cocktail of a creative solution, 100% responsibility, and just innovating probably was perceived to be the options prior. You created something completely different. And innovating the industry. It's not surprising because you're a creative person, but at the same time, it sounds like it was a much more internal process when you were sitting with your friend over drinks.
Yeah.
And you remember back to that moment was it just a click of, oh, I think I need to look at this differently, or did it take some time to brew? Can you dissect that moment a little bit more and the coming hours, day?
Yeah. So, first of all, when she said that, it immediately clicked. It was a total aha moment. But what clicked about it to start was more the idea of how you navigate getting what you want in conversations and in, relationships. So, like I said, I thought, I'm going to Jedi mind trick them by saying what they want to hear in this other way, by shifting my language so that it resonates with what they want to hear. But what I didn't realize right away was that it was actually a transformation of not just the way I spoke about this, but the way I think about it. And that was what was really powerful, because it became this new way of problem solving and also getting myself creatively unstuck. Because really what was happening was I was at this impasse, and I was even asking myself, maybe I'm not able to take our company to the next level. Maybe my company doesn't need me anymore because I care about creative excellence, and I care about the power of images, and I want to wield that power responsibly, and maybe that's not the behavior of a big company. And so I was really in this terrible place where I thought maybe my company has outgrown the skills that I bring to the table and the values that I bring to the table. But after that moment, essentially I remember I went home, and later that night I was, I think I was trying to get my mind off of things, and I was on Pinterest. And I remember I saw this image of it was like a little pill with a happy face on it on a blue background. And something about it I saw it and I thought, oh, that's interesting, because it was a very open-ended image. It could represent a lot of different things in terms of the storytelling and the narrative, but visually it was really fun. It was playful. It felt very on brand for us, and I just immediately pinned it to a new board, and I and I called the board anti-stock. And then I basically went on this Pinterest spree where I was looking for images that felt both specific and open-ended, like images that I thought could really represent a lot of different topics. And I started especially pulling images in the areas where stock photography was failing. Like they were all so cliche. So I just started kind of looking for these images. And the next day I went in and I sat with our photo editor and I asked her, I said, what do you think is the feasibility of starting this anti-stock archive for us? She was like, I think we could do it. She's like, this person is a photographer as well as a photo editor. I could ask them to start shooting some things when they have downtime. We can shoot in the office. We can shoot our staffers. And we just started to build it from there. I also started employing that new language when I spoke to people, and I started to think about it differently. I started to think about it less about my way or their way, one way triumphing. It was less of a zero-sum game. It became truly a game of how do I solve their problem in a way that also adheres to my value system.
It's brilliant. And what you learned about yourself and your ability to take that application of that experience and apply it to, I'm sure you find yourself using that as a bit of a template for problems left and right now. But the fact that at one point, it went from we need to decentralize creative because there's a bottleneck and how do we scale this or whatever the conversation was to flipping it on its head. You're democratizing now what stock photography kind of used to mean, and it's stereotypes, and it's such a great case study for just creativity in a business sense, but also, that energy. I keep going back to, I have this picture in my head of you and your friend talking this through, and that hand gesture and just the energy of that to be able to, oh gosh, amazing. Well, and it's interesting. This is your why not now, because one of my questions for you that I had written down was, how do you, with a company that's grown to the size of yours and in the role and position you're in, how do you find the space but still steer that ship? And how do you be agile like a speedboat, like a creative person kind of needs to be, and have space but also, I guess the word scale is coming to mind even though it's so overused, but you started to answer that. But can you elaborate on how you design space to be creative when you're as busy and held accountable for this big operation?
Yeah, I think that example really shaped the whole way that I started thinking about it, because I stopped thinking about me. It was many things that kind of shifted from that point. I went from approving things to providing filters and providing toolkits and thinking about really getting into my own process and understanding, looking back at certain buckets of decisions that I was called to make over and over and over again, or work that I was called to approve over and over and over again, like new work but same areas. And what I started to do was to go back and think about the feedback that I had given people, why I had said yes or why I had said no, and really categorize what those things were. One example of that was, that at that time I was approving a lot of the image openers that were going up on our homepage in our newsletter, which now I can't even believe I was approving those things. But at the time, that was the only way I really knew how to maintain quality control. And so, immediately following that conversation, I looked back at all of the email exchanges and times that I had approved one of these images, and I created this filter basically with the 7 criteria that I realized I was constantly using to say yes or say no. And I said, as long as this image follows these criteria, it's good to go. And so now you have the filter and you guys get to decide. And so for me now, when I think about my role, I really try to focus myself on as much as possible, providing the guidelines, the toolkits, those guardrails for the highway, as well as the North Star. I think my biggest role in the company is to share the vision and share our why, and really help people to understand the values and the mission of the company and how they can then apply those into their role, no matter what they're doing, whether, they're organizing internal events or creating our next huge video series. I think that's truly kind of at the heart of it.
We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. Hi, everyone. If you are digging this podcast, please subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes. It just takes a moment and it means a ton to us. Also, after recording more than 100 episodes, I've created a bit of a cheat sheet on the top 5 things I've learned from renegades and how they get from idea to action, from dreaming to doing. I will email you the downloadable PDF when you subscribe to my newsletter. Just head to amyjomartin.com and click on Connect with Me. I'm taking notes here. This is so timely for me right now.
That's
thank
good.
you. Yeah, no, absolutely. I'd love to touch a little bit on your why for Refinery 29, and then also, and I have a ton of questions.
I just was remembering that I know that Simon Sinek is such a big inspiration of yours and was one of your first guests on the show. So, I love his TED Talk, and I definitely think about the why a lot.
For people who maybe aren't as familiar with Refinery 29, it's so conducive to this audience and will resonate. But I think it'd be helpful to hear from the co-founder of why you started it, and has your why evolved over time?
It has. So I think, it was funny because the other Why Not Now story that came to mind for me was when we were starting Refinery. I was working as a photo director at a small indie magazine, but I was craving the next thing. I had been there for 5 years and I had that entrepreneurial itch, and simultaneously I was dating this guy Philip, and he and his friend Justin had the initial idea for Refinery. And because I love building and because I love just exercising my creativity and imagination, and we were living together, I just started helping out. I was, helping them build the concept, helping them build the look and feel, the vision of it, content ideas. And I'd probably been working on it for a couple of months. I was working on it nights, weekends, sometimes my lunch break, but I wasn't officially a part of it. And I remember they were looking for an editor for this site, and they asked me if I knew anyone, and I said, well, why don't you call my friend Christine? She used to be the executive editor at City, and actually had hired me when I had started as an intern there. And I said, why don't you call her? I'm sure she'll know someone. And in my mind, she was going to recommend another former intern or an assistant of hers. And then she totally surprised me. She called me up and she said, I love this idea. I think it has so much potential. And I really want to come on as the editor of this site. But I was talking to Philip and Justin, and they were kind of vague about what your role is. And I can only do this if you come on and do it with me officially.
Wow.
She asked me why not now. I felt like that was this moment where her belief in the project made me really all of a sudden kind of snapped into clarity for me, the potential there. It made me ask myself, why not now, and why have I not made this official? And it made me realize something that I think a lot of creative people fail to realize, which is the value of our own time and input, and the fact that I had been giving those things away for a couple of months without any official title or arrangement or involvement or skin in the game.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was this moment where I all of a sudden was like, oh my God, you're so right. Then it was this conversation of, me being involved on a more official capacity, which then led to me quitting my job and really devoting myself to starting Refinery. And when we started Refinery, to get back to your actual question, when we started Refinery at the time, it started so small, and basically we were inspired by a lot of the independent designers and store owners around us in New York and in Brooklyn specifically, and really how they were cultivating this unique perspective and this unique view on style, and these communities of style around them that for whom style was about self-expression versus something that was about rules. And I think what really struck us was how so much of fashion at the time was really designed to make people feel bad about themselves, and really reinforcing this very narrow lens of what beauty looked like, that to be beautiful was to be tall, thin, young, wealthy, and that, if you weren't those things, you should be striving to be those things regardless of how improbable that was or how futile that was. And for us, we lived in New York. We loved the celebration of individuality and self-expression that style could represent. And so really we started it with this very small concept that was focused on celebrating individuality, self-expression, and independent voices in style. At the beginning, people said we were never going to be successful because we were focused on these small designers and small stores that didn't have a ton of marketing dollars and that weren't huge household names. But they actually became our supporters. Our first advertiser was Oak, this small store in Brooklyn. Our first investor was Stephen Allen, who had several stores across the country, and we kind of grew it from there. But over time, definitely our why has evolved. We started with style, and then we quickly moved into beauty. And again, really this idea of beauty as a celebration of self and expanding the idea of who gets to take up space. We wanted to expand that lens of what beauty looked like. And instead of using it as a weapon against people's self-esteem, to use it to reinforce people's worth, reinforce people's ability to self-realize, and really, allow people to be seen that weren't really seen or valued in traditional fashion and beauty spaces. And then from there, we just kept expanding, and we kept, I think at the core was this idea of individuality, celebrating self-expression, inclusivity, elevating underrepresented voices. And over time, we've really determined that our why is to really be a catalyst for women to claim their power, really be a place that, roots for the heroines and celebrates women's stories and elevates their voices. That's what it's come to be, but I think it's been definitely an evolution over time. That's been actually something that's been really beautiful and exciting to me, is to be able to evolve. I think so often we feel like we need to be tied to something because it's how we did it before, or what we said we were going to do, or who we thought we were. And I think that both individually and as companies, there is so much room to grow and continue to reassess and to evolve your identity and evolve your sense of purpose.
I really appreciate you acknowledging that and sharing the journey from style to where you are now. It's a pretty big evolution and expansion, especially when it comes to looking at the impact and the exponential, chart potentially of where this has gone. And it might be easy for some media entities, companies, brands to say, nope, this was the vision all along and we stuck to it. And if you hadn't been open, then look at how constrictive that could have been to evolving your why. And that's a really cool story of not having such a strangle kind of hold down on, no, this is it, and we're just going to stay the course, and so on and so forth. So thank you. And I think, too, you're a pioneer and really a voice of authority when it comes to the topic of body image in the media in a way that's, to me, it feels more innocent and pure than some of the older media entities that maybe have a different why, but are still trying to embrace it. And regardless of who knows what sometimes the motivations are, and hopefully they're pure. But I guess my question is, for someone that has your lens on this paradigm shift that we're going through, what are some of the misunderstood elements or things that people who don't necessarily have your frontline view would be surprised by it or could be educated on?
I mean, I think that, one thing that people don't always realize or you just take for granted because we live in such a visual culture, our brains process images so much quicker than they process text, and we see so many images every day in advertising and social media, all around us. And I think we don't always realize how we internalize the images that we see and the power that those images hold over the way that we measure ourselves and we measure what society values. And, I think that there's definitely been a lot more talk about representation of all forms of both representation within visual imagery, representation in front of the lens, as well as representation in terms of who's making Hollywood films, who are the directors that are valued. And I think all of those things really need to be interrogated, because the truth is that most of the images that we see, most of the stories that we see, most of the, even the design of the world that we live in has been created by men with men as the default user. And that just means that we're not represented in the creative process, and those things, therefore, aren't created for us with our uniqueness in mind. Mm-hmm. And I think that, to me, this is a time to challenge all of these systems and to ask ourselves questions and to question the world around us. And even for me, as we were creating this anti-stock archive, and particularly as we started doing the Getty collection, we were super focused on body inclusivity, taking the insight that 67% of women in the United States are size 14 and up, and yet the media only represents them 1% to 2%. And so we had taken that in particular and said, we really want to do better by plus-size women, by this invisible majority. We want to make them visible in the images that we see. In even going through that process, I realized how much we are brainwashed. I know that sounds extremist, but it's just my way of explaining the fact that we internalize these things. We internalize, it's not just what we see, but it's what we hear growing up, when people comment on our weight, and when we don't see any plus-size women showed positively in stock imagery, in advertising, in, TV, when they're always the butt of the joke, we learn that it's a shameful thing to be a plus-size person. In creating the collection for me, I realized biases of my own that needed to be addressed, mm-hmm. and even how I saw myself or how I thought about myself based on my weight at a certain point. So for me, creating the collection was actually really transformative, and it was interesting to hear how people responded to it, because I did a lot of press when the collection came out, and a lot of people asked me the same question. They said, aren't you promoting an unhealthy lifestyle with these images? I thought that was such an interesting and telling question that really underscored the bias, because this idea that by showing something, you're promoting it, but because we are brainwashed to believe that being thin is neutral because it's what we see all the time, we don't question when we see a thin person what that person's health status mm-hmm. is. I think now there's more questioning of what impact retouching and these beauty standards have on people, but I think for the most part we don't question them. And the way that I think about it is that we're not promoting an unhealthy lifestyle. We're making visible women who are invisible. And if you're really concerned about health, it's important to think about the effects that shame have on people's mental health, and that in choosing to not show a portion of the population and the images that we see in the world around us, that is what we're perpetuating.
Oh, I love that. It's back to your original point of just looking at the problem differently. And there's a lot of power in economics solving problems. So if you can take that angle, it's brilliant. And one of the reasons I was so interested to hear your point of view, and I appreciate that you've shared it, is because all my life I struggled with body image and eating disorders, and I've never really known how to talk about it because I haven't fully understood it. The unconscious bias and the subconscious bias, whatever we want to call it, is so deep. And what I'm realizing myself, and I just think it's just come to me while listening to you, is for me, I think a lot of this is 100% responsibility in, okay, what can we do to mobilize a shift in behavior, a shift in ourselves? First, it's an inside job, of course, but just getting started and like, how do we get creative about it? Because I do see and hear, and I'm exposed to and absorb all of the body positivity work that's going on, and it's great. And I still feel like there's just a big something missing about the solution here, or it's not like it's just one solution. It's going to take some time, but being an accelerating force in it. So it's just fascinating. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to think about with any kind of change that we're passionate about. I think a lot about that Desmond Tutu quote that's, I'm probably going to botch it, but basically about do your little bit of good in the world, and all those little bits of good will change the world. I forget what the exact quote is, but I just think a lot about sort of how we all have the power to use our unique gifts to create change. An example that I love is the moving company that devoted themselves to helping survivors of domestic violence get out of bad situations. What a fantastic example of using your unique skill, your unique business to do something good. And I think everyone has that power. For me, that's in creativity and storytelling, but everyone has a unique platform to create change.
You're so right. And all these little micro acts turn into macro change for sure.
Yeah.
It's very true. So I have a couple of rapid fire questions for you. Okay, so what's one lesson that you find yourself learning over and over?
The lesson I find myself learning over and over and over again is just because something comes easy to you doesn't mean it's not valuable. Just because something comes easy to you doesn't mean it's not worth cultivating. And I think I've learned that because I think it's hardest for us to see our strengths because they come easy to us, and we become fixated on our weaknesses and the things that we see as a deficit versus focusing on our unique gifts and how we can cultivate those and bring those into areas that are less comfortable and less familiar.
That's so good. All-time favorite book?
I'm definitely someone that, if you ask me what my favorite song is right now, I forget what music is. But I think the book that comes to mind off the top of my head is actually a children's book that I recently reread because I'm expecting a daughter in a month. And the book is called Elf. Thank you. Mm-hmm. The book is called Elfwin Saga, and it is a beautiful children's book about a Nordic girl who has lost her sight, but she sees better than, oh gosh, I'm going to cry talking about it. She sees better than anyone else. I just reread it and I was in tears. I don't even know if I'll be able to read it to my daughter because it's such a beautiful folk tale. It's basically about the creation of the Northern Lights. But it's beautiful, and it's all woodcut illustrations, and I just love it. My mom read it to me.
Can you think of a recent oh shit moment and how you got out of it?
Ooh, a recent oh shit moment. Shoot, I can't think of anything.
That's okay. Probably a good thing. What keeps you up at night?
Sometimes the state of the world keeps me up at night. Sometimes I am up at night because I am constantly afraid of not fulfilling my full potential, which I don't know that anyone can even fulfill their full potential because our potential is so vast. And then sometimes I'm awake at night because I routinely wake up at 3:30 a.m. with lots of ideas, and it's actually my best thinking time, unfortunately, for me.
It's good to know and be self-aware, though, so you can.
Yeah, no, it's definitely been something that's. I don't fight it anymore. I've just learned to roll with it. Like I'll get up, I'll put the lights on really low. I make myself a tea, and I just write in my journal until I get tired again. And then in the morning, I look at my journal, and sometimes it's gibberish, and sometimes it's just gold.
That's awesome. That's so cool. And pirates or ninjas, who is tougher and why?
I think ninjas are tougher. They're so sly, and I don't know, I feel like they have the power of going undetected and then making themselves known. Team ninjas.
Team ninjas?
And they have interesting designed weapons.
That's a good point.
Very creative weaponry and very creative moves. Like they're more dancerly too, which I like.
They definitely aren't as clunky and clumsy. There you go. It's good rationale there. And last question, what advice would you give to your younger self? And you can choose what age that might be.
I would definitely transmit the lesson that I've had to learn over and over and over again to my younger self, which is basically to value your unique strengths and gifts. And I would also tell my younger self to really be aware of the fact that you can define what success looks like to you, and that just because things are done one way or portrayed one way doesn't mean that's the only way that they can happen. For example, with leadership and learning to value, like for me, I was always like, oh my God, how can I run this company? I went to art school. I didn't go to business school. Everyone's going to see that I'm a big phony, that I don't know what I'm doing. And I think so often, I love that expression, don't compare your insides to someone else's outside. Because I think so often we are having our own struggle, we're beating ourselves up, full of self-doubt, and we look at other people and we think they have it all together when really they're just going through, their own set of struggles and doubts and insecurities. And so I think for a long time I was so fixated on my deficits and the things that I hadn't studied and didn't know, or how or looking at other people and judging myself against them. I spent so much time doing that, and it was actually when I started focusing on my own gifts and strengths and really cultivating those and thinking about how do I bring my strengths of creativity into these business challenges, and how do I bring my kindness and empathy into these challenges. And when I started doing that was really when I started to see results and also feel so much more at ease and fulfilled and able in all of the challenges that came my way. So I would definitely transmit back to my younger self and tell her that, although sometimes I think these lessons are best learned after making the same mistake over and over and over and over again.
Yeah. It's such a good takeaway too. And just you're really valuing your unique strengths and gifts. And I think sometimes those do come so easy for people that they almost skip over them and don't realize that they are so unique. So identifying them too and making sure that we can kind of fully understand our unique strengths and gifts is sometimes like a very first step. Wow. Well, thank you. And where can people follow your journey best?
My journey is best followed on Instagram, I would say. And my handle is at Piera Luisa, Piera Luisa. And yeah, I'm pretty open and transparent on there.
You are, and thank you for being so open and vibrant. And you can feel the zest for life that you have when you visit your Instagram. So
thank you.
Some people go on Pinterest sprees, some go to your Instagram. Yeah.
I love that word, zest.
I definitely. It's a fun word, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a fun word. It's definitely one of the things that I embody and cultivate at the same time.
Love it.
And thank you for this for this beautiful podcast. It's such a gift, and the question, why not now, is such a beautiful gift, and it's a wonderful question to ask every day.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening to the show. Hit me up on social media to let me know what you think. I'm at Amy Jo Martin on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And I want to hear your Why Not Now moments so I can share them on the show. Just send me a note to whynotnow@amyjomartin.com. For show notes and other offers, you can visit amyjomartin.com/whynotnow. And while you're there, don't forget to sign up for my email newsletter for exclusive content and announcements. A big thanks to Rock Salt Music for all of the tunes by the talented John Coggins. And of course, a hat tip to Richard Gruer for editing and producing the show. I'll see you next time. And until then, why not now?